Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian, and I'm streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here on the west coast of Canada, right on the Pacific Ocean. I hope everybody is having a great week so far, staying healthy and staying strong and optimistic. This class, everyone, is an IELTS Task 2 writing class. It's a members chat class, but of course, everybody is welcome to watch. We will have an all chat class in about 90 minutes. That will be the reading section. And in this class, we are going to be discussing some common Band 9 responses, or said another way, some common questions. In fact, today's Task 2 question was sent to us by one of our members. This was the question on a former exam, official IELTS exam, just recently. While we wait for a few more members to join in on the class, this lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com. That's academicenglishhelp.com. For your academic IELTS, definitely check us out there. For the general IELTS, visit us at gieltshelp.com. That's generalieltshelp.com. On both of those websites, we have lots of help for the writing section as well as the listening, reading, and speaking sections of the IELTS exam. We've got videos for you. We've got practice exams, so lots there. This is our academic IELTS website here with the blue background. You can click this big red button to join our premium package. And this is our general IELTS website here with the green background. And again, same idea. Just click this big red button to join our premium package. We are an official British Council IELTS test registration center and certified agents. So you're in good hands with us. Hi Ajmira, hi Patel, welcome June. Good to have you in the class, ready to learn. All right, students. So again, just a reminder, exciting times. We are releasing episode 2 of my IELTS Band 9 journey this Sunday at 14 o'clock Universal Time. I took the official IELTS exam a few months ago and we made a series of that. So part 2 is about preparing for the exam. So that's premiering on our channel. Make sure to check that out. Note that in your calendar. Give yourself a reminder. And if anybody has any questions, you can always send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com, and we will reply to you within 24 hours. Welcome, Akshay. Okay, students, so again, task 2 right now, followed by reading. We've got more classes coming for you Friday and Saturday. And now let's get into our IELTS task 2 writing question. So again, this was sent by June. So June, here it is. We're going to talk about it. And the very first step, of course, is to read the question very carefully. Don't just jump into it, okay? That is a mistake in the IELTS, jumping into these robust questions, okay? Speaking part 2, writing task 1, task 2. These questions require you to think before you speak and think before you write, okay? That is really the path to the high band scores, the 7s, 8s, and 9s. So let's read this together. So IELTS task 2 writing. You should spend about 40 minutes on this task. Scientific research should be carried out and controlled by the government rather than private companies. Do you agree or disagree? Write at least 250 words. Now, the reason this class is called Common Band 9 Task 2s is because these tend to be some pretty popular types of questions in the IELTS. Not only the do you agree or disagree are fairly popular for task 2, but questions which are pertaining to the responsibility of the government. Before we really get into this question, why do you think that is? So why do you think the IELTS tends to ask these questions about the responsibility of the government? Okay, what do you think? So let's get into a little bit of an interesting philosophical discussion here. Why would IELTS have this kind of a question appear time and again for IELTS candidates? Should the government be responsible for this or not? What do you think, Patel and June and Bakrat? Welcome, Carolina, our moderator. Good morning to you as well. Anita, if it's morning time. Hi, Rajveer. So why is that? What do you think that is? I mean, we can only speculate. I don't have the answer for this. I haven't discussed this with IELTS exam creators. Those guys are pretty tough to have a conversation with. But why would IELTS ask questions about the responsibility of the government? Okay. Carolina says, everybody has an opinion about the government. Yeah, that's true, Carolina. So it's one that people can really write about, right? So whether you are a man or a woman, whether you're 20 years old or 50 years old, there is a very good chance that everybody has an opinion about the government. So it's a question that can be addressed by just about anyone taking the IELTS exam. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons, Carolina. Paulo says to try to get a broad view about what IELTS candidates think about society and life in general. I agree with you, Paulo. I do think there is some of that hidden kind of innuendo or purpose to it. Okay. Rajveer says because the government's responsibility is not widely documented. Bakrat says to be involved in politics and to think about politics that control society. Yeah, Bakrat, I think that there is, a lot of that as well. So I think those are all really good opinions. Yeah, so June says they want to make sure people abroad know their responsibilities and the governments in a new role. Yeah, absolutely. So these days, I tend to hear that the government is responsible for society and for people at a very high level. And it seems to be a common idea that individuals are not as responsible for their own welfare as the government. So I think there's a lot of purpose to these questions, and especially because people take IELTS to emigrate to other countries or to learn in other countries. I think these are valuable ideas. So I think those are all really good responses. Yeah, so all of those are great responses. So it is likely that IELTS wants candidates to think of both the government's and individuals' responsibilities for themselves and society, especially as IELTS candidates are people hoping to move to other countries, move or study in other countries. Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize here that it's individuals' responsibilities to oversee the government as much as it is government's responsibility to oversee individuals. So that's an important point to keep in mind here as you go into it. So in countries like Canada, especially, the belief by Canadians is that the government is responsible for its citizens, but just as much the citizens are responsible for their government. Okay, so So yeah, we're getting into a little bit of politics today, but that's important for this type of question to answer it well. And you're going to see that as we develop our planning. So in countries like the UK and Canada, the common belief is that governments are responsible for the welfare of its citizens, and the population is also responsible for itself and its government. Okay. So there's a very famous quote by Kennedy, and I think that quote is very valid, and it's often forgotten. Does anybody know what quote I'm thinking about right now? So if you've ever watched or read of John F. Kennedy in the United States, he's got a really famous quote that resonates well with me, and I think it holds a lot of truth. And it's quite popular, it's quite well known. So again, I'm Canadian, yet I still know this quote from John F. Kennedy. Does anybody know what that quote is before I give it to you? It starts with the word ask. So I wonder if anybody knows that. Okay, I'll type it up, and then let's see if anybody kind of puts it into the chat at the same time. All right. So that's the quote. And yeah, very good, Rajveer. Okay, so Rajveer got it. I can see that you typed it out. Very good. Yeah, so John F. Kennedy's famous quote is, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And this kind of pertains to this concept of the government. So here, when we're talking about country, where really JFK was referring to was the government. So oftentimes people are saying the government has to do this, the government has to do that, the government has to do this. The government is also made up of people, it's made up of citizens. It's not completely true, but there's definitely a valid point there. Okay, good. So let's get back to this question. I wanted to get into a little bit of theory here. Rajveer said I just Googled it. Okay, yeah, I'm sure that came up pretty quickly on Google, Rajveer. So we'll get back to this question because you're going to see that it definitely pertains to this question. It's connected to this question. And when you're getting questions about the government, it's important to keep these ideas in mind, okay? All right. So once again, scientific research should be carried out and controlled by the government rather than private companies. Do you agree or disagree? Okay, so let's paraphrase this question. So first of all, let's paraphrase it so that we can get a better idea of what we're discussing here. And I think paraphrasing here is a really good idea to get deeper insight, to get deeper thought. Okay, so yeah, Buckrat, you probably got a lot too, right, in the Googling there. Okay, so let's do this. Let's paraphrase this. And again, use your own words as much as possible. There are definitely some other ways to express this concept. Okay, there is my paraphrase. Let's see what you came up with. All right. Paulo Reese says, should governments take care and support or even rule scientific research? Yeah, it's not bad, Paulo. I think it's a little bit missing some elements, but it's close. Nick Hill says, national authorities ought to be regulating the execution of experimental investigation instead of private organizations. Do you approve or disprove? Nick Hill, that's quite good. And it's doing it and regulating it. Those are two separate elements. So carry out means to conduct. Okay, another really good verb here is conduct. You conduct research. And controlling it. Controlling it is another element, right? So those are two unique elements in this case. And hopefully you realize that when you're paraphrasing, that to conduct an experiment and to regulate the experiment are not the same idea, right? Okay. Patel Viral says the ruling parties should perform research in science instead of privately owned entities. Do you support this? Patel, you only have one of the controlling ideas, which is performing the research. You don't have the other controlling element, which is regulating. Okay, that's really important. So if anybody misses those two parts and you just see it as one idea, like to do the experiment, then you're going to have a much more difficult time in this essay, and it's not likely that you're going to get, or unlikely that you're going to get, a high band score. Okay, Rashika Rajvir Mohit, Akshay, good. I can't read everybody's comment every time, members, just because then obviously we're not going to move forward fast enough, but don't worry, I'll try to pick out different members at different moments. So this is what I wrote here, empirical experimentation. Empirical experimentation is the scientific method, okay? So for those of you who don't know the word empirical evidence or empirical experimentation, it means that it's visible evidence, so we can see it. Okay, it's kind of like saying, okay, gravity exists. How do I know? Well, I have my my marker here, and boom, there it is. It drops into my hand. So that's empirical evidence for the fact that gravity exists, because you have a small object being pulled towards the Earth, which is the much larger object. So that's your empirical pursuit or empirical experimentation. You should know that for university. Ought to be done. Of course, here is carried out. An even better word for this is conducted. Okay, so we often say conduct an experiment, so conducted. And then controlled. Controlled, of course, means regulated. So especially when you think of governments, you think of laws, legislation, and regulation. Okay, those words should be coming into the picture as you're thinking about this question. So regulated, laws, legislation, rules. Okay. So those words should be coming to mind. By national authorities. So national authorities, governments, instead of civic corporations. So those are private companies. Do you side with this notion or do you disprove it? Okay. Again, paraphrasing, very important so that you think deeply and so that you collect vocabulary for your essay. And I highly recommend writing it down. This is not your introduction, okay? You haven't written the introduction here yet. You've simply just thought about it in a deeper way, and you've come up with some vocabulary. Harvinder, welcome to our group of members. Deepika, welcome aboard, okay? All right, so paraphrasing makes you think critically, and gives you vocabulary. All right, so now we identify the topic, right? Always identify the topic. So what are we talking about here? Okay, when you think about the topic, just think about what are we talking about? Okay, and keep it simple here. Don't overthink it. It's fairly straightforward. So what's the topic? What are we discussing in our essay? I think it's quite easy, should be fairly easy to figure that out in this case. Sometimes the topic is literally, you see it at the very, very beginning. Yeah, Rashika, very good. June says it's conducting and regulating scientific research. Yeah, and I mean, we could simplify that, June, in this case, just like Rashika did in saying scientific research, because scientific research has to be conducted and regulated. So it's a part of the concept of scientific research. If you're not conducting or regulating it, then you're not actually doing scientific research. So in this case, we can just really simply say scientific research, okay? Yeah, conduct and regulate, that's a part of it. Okay, scientific research, if you're not regulating it, it's arguable that it's not truly scientific research. If you're not conducting it, well, you're obviously just not doing it, right? So Patel says scientific experiments. Yeah. Bakrat, you're mixing the controlling ideas with the topic, okay? So here simply the concept is scientific research, all right? Okay. Anita, the topic is usually just a couple of words, okay? It's not going to be a sentence. Same thing, Devansh, okay? If you're writing a full sentence, you're not just identifying the topic, but you're including other thoughts, and or you're not being concise, okay? You need to be concise. So here it's scientific research. Now the controlling idea here is, of course, conducting and regulating should be done by governments and or individuals, okay? So when we talk about companies, we're really talking about individuals, okay, or individual units of society. So that's our controlling idea. Conducting and regulating scientific experiments, of course, is what we're talking about here, and I've just omitted that, but it's intrinsic. Should be done by governments and or individuals. All right. So those are your controlling idea, or in this case, more specifically, they're your controlling ideas. Okay, so we have these ideas, and now we want to go more deeply into this by applying some critical thinking, right? So you want to apply critical thinking to the topic and controlling ideas. And in this case, it's really important to do this because if a student were to just jump into this essay without doing any kind of planning, it would be really hard to come up with good content. And when you're getting into those band 7, band 8, band 9 and the IELTS, you need to have good content, okay? So Rajveer says whether governments or private companies should control and conduct scientific research. Either governments or individuals should conduct and regulate scientific research. Yeah, you're right, Rajveer and Nick Hill. Rajveer, when you're doing the planning, I definitely recommend keeping the points for the controlling ideas in the same order as the question. So go for conduct first, and then control. Just have that organized in your mind in the same way as in the question. It's going to lead to a better result in the end, okay? So, first of all, what is scientific research? So, what is scientific research? How would you define that? And of course, this is a great question to answer for us in English for the academic IELTS, because I'm sure lots of students are planning to go to university to do their bachelor's, their master's, PhD, and this is a question that you have to know the answer to in English, and you have to be able to give a response for. And of course, it's a good idea to be able to define this in society as well. So what is scientific research? How do we define that? And if you Google it, I'm sure you'll get the answer, but if you know it, that's even better. So what is it? What is scientific research? So Patel says it's efforts being made to attain a specific breakthrough. That's okay, Patel, but it's not actually descriptive. Harwinder says it's researching for facts. What are those? Rajveer says it's experimentation to prove a point and collect some empirical evidence to support it. Yeah, exactly. So scientific research is the pursuit of knowledge through so here's one definition for you. I'm sure you'll get some other ones. It's the pursuit of knowledge through hypotheses, experimentation, and empirical evidence. Okay? So we look to create knowledge and information by coming up with a hypothesis or a theory, right? So we say, hey, I think there's such a force as gravity. This is Isaac Newton, of course, which appears in some of our other materials. And Isaac Newton says there's a force called gravity, which is a universal law. This law is that larger objects will attract smaller objects to them, or there's an attraction between objects. And then let's set out to prove this in some way. And then we set out and we prove this in various ways. Okay, so this is scientific research, the pursuit of knowledge through hypotheses, experimentation, and empirical evidence. So through visible proof, right? All right, so the next question, right, is why do we do it? So that's a tough one to answer, but it's a good question. We sure invest a lot of our human efforts into this question. So why do we have this scientific research? And this is important so that you can create your introductory paragraph, so that you can create good examples, so that you can develop your thoughts around this question. So why do we do this? While you think about that, I'll take a look at some other answers. Devansh says to carry out measurement and experimentation in the pursuit of knowledge, Devansh, and then you're on the right track. Okay. Anita, yes, it's a systematic method, usually, absolutely. And that systematic method is part of that empirical pursuit. Patel says, for the betterment of humans. Yeah, I agree with you, Patel. One of our primary reasons to do scientific research is to provide a better quality of life, or that's what we hope for human beings, right? So why do we do this? To improve humans' quality of life. Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a big part of it. Rajveer says for the betterment of society and to solve unsolved puzzles of the universe. June says because it leads to practical or theoretical breakthroughs that can be applied to improving people's lives. Yeah, so to improve human quality of life, to gain a better understanding of the universe, right? To satisfy our curiosity, as humans are extremely curious. Okay, and how do we do this? So how do we do this? Of course, theory followed by method, followed by experimentation, followed by results. Sure, that's one way to define the how do we do this. Also, when you're thinking about how do we do this, think about examples. Okay, so here, it's a very important one. You want to visualize, right? Okay. When you visualize an experiment, okay, when you visualize scientific research, when you visualize an experiment, what do you think of? So what is the example that comes to mind for you when you visualize a scientific experiment? I'm really curious here what pops into mind, because I think that this idea, this specific example, this visualization, this picture of an experiment will give you a lot of great thoughts about how you can write this essay. Okay, so Nick Hill says vaccination. Akshay says preventing a chronic disease. Rajveer says NASA and ISR, so scientists conducting experiments. Okay, I think all of those are great. So space exploration and so forth. Yeah, so medical and space exploration. And when you think about medical or space exploration, yeah, Akshay, sure, COVID-19 vaccination, those are all really, really good ones to think about. So how is the experiment actually conducted initially? Who are the test subjects? So I would really digress here. Digress means go deep into thought here. Okay, so it's good to digress. Digress means to go deeply into it. And I would go into who is the, or what is the test subject. Okay. So when we want to know if humans can go into space, who do we test on first? When we test a vaccine, who do we test on first? Okay, Bior, very good. So Bior Atem right out of the gate says using animals and lab rats by Patel. Absolutely. So as most of you know, the first living creature that humans fired into space was not a human. It was a dog by the Russians, right? And I guarantee you that the vaccines which are being used for COVID were not tested on humans first, but were tested on animals first, I'm sure. So, okay. And even a word comes to mind here. I don't know the spelling, but it's Sputnik. Maybe like that. So the Sputnik vaccine by the Russians for COVID-19, that's kind of an ironic one here because, of course, it pertains to both the space launch of the dog and it pertains to the vaccine as well. So if you think of Sputnik, then you can think of both the dog being experimented on as an astronaut and animals being tested on for COVID. So the sound looks good on my end, Bakrat, so maybe check on your end. For me, it's still giving me a strong signal. If anybody else is having trouble with the sound, let me know. But the microphone seems to be good on my end, Bakrat. So yeah, Nick Hill says it's clear. So Bakrat, I think it's on your end. Okay, so definitely we've got some good ideas here. Now, you know, we're taking a lot of time to go through these steps to develop these ideas. And of course, I realize that in the IELTS, you only have 40 minutes. However, the goal here is for you to train your thinking so that you can move through these concepts and create this visual image very, very quickly. Okay? All right? So now we get into the actual controlling ideas. So you want to think critically about the controlling ideas. Okay? All right. So some of the answers are innate or obvious. So what is conducting scientific research? It means doing the empirical study by the government or the individual corporations. And what is the question? So instead of me giving you the question, because it's clearly, so the key, the essence of getting those high band scores is asking the right questions. So to get band 7 to 9, you must ask the right questions in your planning. So what would be a good question to ask ourselves at this point to come up with a good answer of whether or not I agree or disagree with the fact that governments should conduct and regulate? Okay. Deepika, I know that not every study involves animals. Absolutely. So there are lots of studies that don't involve animals, that involve humans only, or not even humans. That's fine. However, the idea, you'll see why I want you to think about animal research here. So there is a logic to this. Okay? Yeah. And I know, of course, Deepika, that not every research involves animals. Yes. A lot of research doesn't. Some research involves human subjects right away. So, but we'll get into that. Okay? Rajveer says, asking what are the benefits of conducting scientific research by government? Sure. So what are the benefits of government research? What would be a benefit of government research? Okay. That's a very good question, Rajveer. Okay, so what would be one of the benefits? Okay, let's answer that question. So Deepika says strict regulations. Sure. And what else? If I think about it, one comes to mind is lots of funding. Yeah, Rajveer said that too. So proper funding. Governments tend to have a lot of money, so they have lots of funding. So you have strict regulations and lots of fundings. Okay, all right, good. So very good. Next question. What are the benefits of private research? Okay. So let's move along here. Now we're starting to get some ideas. So what are the benefits of private research? Okay, Bior says freedom or less regulation, right? More freedom for theory, right? Okay. Arvinder says more focused work. If you think about the, so less regulation, right? We can almost say that as a, okay, think about the COVID vaccine. So we have Moderna, we have Pfizer, we have Sputnik, so we have lots of different ones. This research was not really conducted by governments, it was conducted by private corporations. They carry the names of those corporations. So what was the benefit there? So Rajveer says a lot of alternatives. I would say that as well. So competition and variety, right? So competition leading to variety. So you have more than one perspective, okay? And competition is arguably very effective. Okay, all right. So now, if we look at the negatives, right? So what are the negatives of these? Then we can also go government, less variability, okay, and private, we can say less ethics, okay. So hopefully you eventually end up with these kinds of ideas. So when you have research, scientific research that's conducted by the government, there tends to be more of a narrow focus because you don't have that competition, you don't have those multiple perspectives, you don't have maybe as much freedom in the research process. However, with private corporations, you might not have as much regulation, and because of that, you might not have as much ethics. Now, we could argue this to the end of the world that it's not always true. So June says lack of regulation in sensitive fields such as nuclear weapons experiments or animal research, right? As we said before, so ethics in animal research with private corporations, pharmaceuticals often become questionable. Okay, so now we should be able to come up with our thesis. Okay, so if I go back to this question, okay, the original question, task 2, scientific research should be carried out and controlled by the government rather than private companies. Do you agree or disagree? What do you think in this case is the ideal answer? So what is the right answer for this? What is, I don't want to say right answer, but what is the best answer to have a high band essay in your IELTS task 2 here? What would you say after really thinking critically about experimentation? And students here, sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So it means just look at what happens in society. Look at what happens in the modern world. Are scientific experiments solely controlled and regulated and conducted by private corporations or governments or by both? And if you think about that critically, you'll kind of come up with the answer fairly fast on your own as well. Okay, so what's the right answer here? Okay, so Rajveer says by both. Paulo says the best answer is I disagree. Yeah, exactly, Apollo. So disagreeing is basically saying both, right? So Paulo and Rajveer actually have the same answer. So Paulo says, I disagree. So we disagree with the fact that scientific research should be carried out and controlled by the governments rather than private companies because they should be done by both. So scientific research should be carried out by private corporations as well as governments, right? So in this case, Paulo, you're not sitting on the fence. You're disagreeing with the fact because here the statement itself is one-sided. So this is kind of an awkward one here, right? Because when you disagree, you actually say both. because the statement itself chooses the side of the government only. Okay? So Deepika says, but I agree that it should be done by the government. I agree, Deepika, it should be done by the government, but I also disagree that it should be carried out and controlled by the government rather than. So it's this part here, it's this rather than private companies that you disagree with. So you have to be very careful with it. Okay? All right? So this would be my thesis statement here. Okay, so something like this, right? I disagree that governments should be solely responsible for conducting and regulating experiments, as empirical pursuits by private corporations contribute competition, while authorities provide ethics to the process. Okay, so here I have my position. I disagree with it. Okay, and the reason I disagree with it is because of what we have just discussed, right? So when you have private corporations, they provide competition. Competition results in variety and oftentimes better results, okay? But at the same time, authorities provide the ethics to the process, so making sure that humanity retains its humanity, okay? All right? So I hope that makes sense for the thesis. Does everybody see how this thesis works well for this question? Okay. June writes, in my opinion, it is both the government and private corporations' responsibilities to conduct and regulate scientific research. The former ensures ethics, while the latter dynamism. Yeah, okay. It's a bit awkward there, June, in the end. June, I would also say very clearly that I disagree with this statement. So, June, I would write, in my opinion, it is both the government's responsibility to conduct ethical research, while private corporations' responsibility to conduct a variety of research. Therefore, I disagree with the opinion that it's solely the government's task. Okay, so make sure you somehow incorporate, June, into your thesis that you're actually disagreeing. So answer the question directly. Okay, Sasi Kumar says, wherever required, both government and private companies should be involved. It is a concern of national security and other sensitive issues. Government should do the research. It's a bit unclear, Kumar. You need to rethink that. It feels like you're going off into your own world a little bit on the topic, and you have to come back, okay? No, Paulo, it's not later, it's latter. So it is the double T in this case. So Rajveer says, I disagree with the statement that scientific research should be conducted and regulated by government only, as corporations incite competition and governments ensure regulation. Very nice, Rajveer. That is a beautiful thesis. Okay, I would actually pick yours over mine in this case. It's even a bit clearer, okay, and more direct. So Rajveer has a very good thesis there. Okay, so now we have our thesis statement, and I believe that many of you now have clarity on how this essay will be built up. Okay? All right. So now we're ready to write the introductory paragraph. Introductory paragraph. Okay. And that has a hook. background, and thesis. And we have all this information now available to us from our planning. So I think that we have our hook, okay? We have our background, we have our thesis. You just have to put it together. The thesis, of course, is right here. Use your own version of it. Do the introductory paragraph on your own for homework. Okay, so I'm going to assign this to you for homework. And then we'll complete the essay, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. Tomorrow, I will also have my introductory paragraph ready for this question. Don't overthink it, okay? So all of this information, it's already there. It's in our planning. You just have to put it together nicely using your own words. If you're a little bit new to this and you're not sure what to write, don't worry. We will go through, or we will review the introductions tomorrow, the introductory paragraphs. If you need a bit more help, you can also check out some of the videos that show you how to do this and then put together the introductory paragraph, okay? But I hope that gives everybody clarity on this question. June, thank you for sending this question. It's true, there are a lot of Task 2 questions that are asking about the level of involvement of the government. So it's a good one. We'll do this one. We'll maybe do one more next week as well in the all chat classes that has to do with the government. Okay, and then we'll move forward. So that's it. Okay, Paulo, this will be on YouTube. Increase it, YouTube, please. I'm not sure, Paulo, what you mean by that, but anyway. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, put together the introductory paragraph, and we'll continue on tomorrow. I will be back in about 30 minutes for the all chat class. That will be a reading section. Okay, so fresh new reading section. So make sure to hang out for that. Thank you, Carolina, for moderating. Great participation today from many of our members. It's beautiful to see. And I'll see everybody shortly in 30 minutes. Again, remember to check us out at aehelp.com for academic IELTS and glshelp.com for general IELTS, where we teach you English, grammar, vocabulary, critical thinking, and communication skills to get those high band scores. All right, everyone. See you shortly. Bye.